I'm Tess Moody with Clemson Extension. I'm a Forestry and Natural Resources Associate. In my last video, I talked about building and creating an indoor carnivorous bog. And I also mentioned putting your plants through dormancy. All these plants have to go through dormancy because they are a temperate species plant. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make dormancy happen in the indoor environment. In the indoor environment, we put the plants in the refrigerator. These plants have to go through winter when they're in the outdoors. And in the winter, the temperatures drop typically below 45 degrees on average for about 45 days. And so we use that same principle with the indoor dormancy period, where we put them in the refrigerator for about 45 days, or at least 45 days. If they were outside, they would go through this whole process naturally. We wouldn't have to do any of this. So if you have an outdoor bog, don't worry about this part. If you have the terrarium, you can put your whole terrarium outside to force this part. But it would need to be a covered outdoor area so that rain and debris doesn't fall into the terrarium. Before we get started, let's talk about the tools and equipment that you should have on hand. It's a very small list of materials, equipment that you need. For me, I like to have something like a tray so that I can put all of my dirty things on this tray while I'm working. Keeps my space a little bit cleaner. So we have a nice tray here, a trowel, of course, to help us lift those plants out of the terrarium, and some shears, some trimming shears to cut the leaves, and we'll get to that later. And for both of those tools, I have sanitized, decontaminated the tools with 70% alcohol and a shop towel. I also have a container. This is a 16-quart container for putting the plants in for the dormancy period, so that they go in this before they go in the refrigerator. And then I also have tape and a marker just to mark the date that they're going into the refrigerator so that we don't forget when we put them in there. It makes it easier for keeping up with things later. So now we're going to work on removing the plants. So I've moved things around a little bit. I've gotten on a little step stool back here so I can more easily reach into the tank. And I've got my tray up here and my trowel up here so that we can more easily remove these plants. Okay, we're gonna start by removing our first hybrid pitcher plant. If you recall, we have about 3 of these hybrid pitcher plants. This one is referred to as velvet. So we're going to gently lift it out of the terrarium substrate. Shake off some of that substrate material. Look at how great those roots are. And we're gonna just gently set it on our tray for later. All right, so we're gonna remove this Venus flytrap. Now when you're putting your trowel in, make sure that you're giving plenty of space around the plant, because these roots have grown considerably from when you planted them, most likely. So we're going to gently pull up, get the base of that plant, make sure that all of our roots are there. And be very careful when moving the Venus flytraps so that you don't touch the traps, because touching the traps can trigger them. And we don't want to unnecessarily trigger them. So now let's remove the bog violet. We have now removed all of our plants from the bog terrarium. You can see that we still have some substrate on the roots of our plants, but we removed the biggest parts, and you can see some bare roots on some of these. And in order to protect those bare roots over their dormancy period, we've also removed some soil from the terrarium to plant them back into it, into the soil, to keep those roots nice and damp over their dormancy period. We're going to fit all of these plants into this container, and in order to do that, I'm going to need to trim down some of these plants. You can see that the pitcher plants in particular, these hybrid pitcher plants, even when I squish them all the way down to the bottom, they're still standing over the edge of the container. And so we're going to be trimming those pitchers off. That sounds pretty severe, but I promise you it's fine, because these pitchers die back anyway during dormancy. In the wild, they would all be brown and collapsed on the ground. You wouldn't even know there's a pitcher plant there. So cutting them back to fit into this box, perfectly fine for them. And in fact, they would do it normally anyway. I'm going to start probably with the biggest plants and then move towards the smallest plants when I go to put these into this box. And I'll show you that as well. Now, like me, you may have been surprised when you dug up some of these plants and found just a massive root system. When I put this is the cranberry, when I put this little cranberry in there, it had just a small plug, probably about the same size as this Venus flytrap. But look at the root system that has grown on this cranberry. The Venus flytrap didn't grow as many roots because it definitely experienced a lot of shock after we planted it in there. But look at the size of those traps now. Amazing, huge. Okay, we now have every plant tucked nice neatly into our dormancy container. Now, if you are not as familiar with the plants, you might want to put the tags in with each of the plants as you pull them out. You might want to make sure that they stay with their plant so that in the spring you don't have troubles trying to put the tags back in. But I'm going to put my tags just in a stack in this dormancy container with them, just right on the side. I've also, as I said before, put the date on a piece of tape so that I know exactly, so that we can remember exactly when we put this dormancy container together. And now, all we have left to do is to put it in the fridge. Okay, we're ready to put these plants in the dormancy container inside the fridge. They need to be in there for 45 total days. During that time, make sure that you check about every week to make sure that the soil remains damp. Once again, only use the demineralized water when you're watering them. You want to make sure the substrate stays at about a wet sponge stage. So not dripping sponge. We don't want them flooded during this time. We don't want them to remain too saturated, but just damp enough to keep those roots nice and moist. Also a reminder, these plants during dormancy don't need lights. You don't have to worry about giving them any sunlight or any of the full spectrum lighting. During the winter, once again, they reduce all of their leaves down to just the rhizome. They lose pretty much all their leaves, so they wouldn't be getting any sunlight anyway. All right, let's put it in the fridge. And we'll check back in the spring.